Imagine the world gripped by a pandemic, cities on lockdown, fear spreading faster than the disease itself. Sound familiar? The coronavirus pandemic of 2020 brought modern society to its knees. But as terrifying as that was, it pales in comparison to what the world faced in the 14th century. No masks, no vaccines, no antibiotics, just death sweeping across continents. This was the Black Death, the deadliest pandemic in recorded history. While COVID-19 changed the way we live, the Black Death changed the course of civilization itself. It wasn't just a health crisis. It was a wave of destruction so powerful that it reshaped entire societies, toppled economies, and rewrote the fate of nations. Imagine a disease so unstoppable that it wiped out nearly 1/3 of Europe's population. Entire towns disappeared, cultures crumbled, and fear spread like wildfire.
But how did it all start? How did this unseen terror manage to sweep across the globe with such lethal precision? To truly grasp the horror of the Black Death, we have to journey back to the 1330s, where its origins lay in the rugged wilderness of Central Asia, likely somewhere in what is now China or Mongolia. It began quietly, deep in the wilds, where a bacterium known as Yersiniapestis found a deadly host, fleas that lived on rats. No one could have guessed that these tiny creatures would unleash one of the greatest catastrophes in human history. But trade routes, especially the Silk Road, acted as highways for the disease. Flea-infested rats would sneak aboard merchant caravans and ships, unknowingly transporting the plague from city to city, continent to continent. By the time the disease reached the bustling port of Messina in Sicily in 1347, Europe was blissfully unaware of the nightmare that was about to unfold. Ships from the east, carrying not just valuable goods but also rats teeming with fleas, docked on European shores. Within weeks, the Black Death exploded across Italy and began its grim march through France, Spain, England, and beyond.
Imagine waking up one morning to a sudden, mysterious fever. Within hours, painful, blackened lumps would swell in your armpits and groin, the notorious buboes. Soon, you'd be coughing blood, writhing in pain, and within days, you'd be dead. The plague was relentless. Once it entered a town, up to 60% of the population could be wiped out in a matter of weeks. It wasn't just killing people, it was killing societies. Entire villages were abandoned, fields went untended, markets stood empty. In places like Florence, where the population was once thriving, 80% of the inhabitants perished. The streets were filled with the dead. There weren't enough living people left to bury the bodies. And in Paris, London, and other major cities, the story was the same, a ceaseless parade of death. While today's pandemics can be tracked and traced with modern technology, in the 14th century, no one understood what was happening. Theories about the plague ranged from divine punishment to bad air. Physicians, in their bizarre beaked masks, designed to ward off what they believed were harmful mists, were helpless. Superstition ran rampant, and religious flagellants whipped themselves in the streets, hoping their self-inflicted suffering would spare them from God's wrath. But no amount of prayers or rituals could stop it. The plague didn't just devastate Europe. It ravaged parts of Asia and North Africa too. In China, where the plague likely originated, millions died. The same fate awaited Egypt, where the bustling city of Cairo lost nearly half its population. No one was safe from its deadly grip.
In total, it's estimated that 25 to 30 million people died across Europe, and many more across Asia and Africa. To put that in perspective, that's more than the combined populations of Canada and Australia today. And it wasn't just the immediate loss of life. The plague changed the fabric of society forever. With so many dead, labor became scarce, shifting the balance of power from feudal lords to surviving peasants, sowing the seeds for the end of the medieval era. So what stopped it? How did the Black Death finally come to an end? It never really stopped. It just ran out of people to kill. After wiping out entire populations, the disease had fewer and fewer hosts to infect. Yet the bacteria that caused it, Yersiniapestis, never fully disappeared. The Black Death would return in waves throughout the centuries, haunting Europe for hundreds of years. It wasn't until 1894 during another plague outbreak in Hong Kong that a French-Swiss bacteriologist named Alexander Yersin uncovered the true culprit. Yersin identified Yersiniapestis under a microscope, finally linking the disease to the fleas and rats that carried it. But even then, it took several more decades before modern medicine had the tools to fight back.
In 1943, a breakthrough came when Selman Waksman discovered streptomycin, an antibiotic that finally offered a cure for the plague. Today, antibiotics can treat the disease effectively if caught early, but for centuries, the Black Death remained a terrifying and unstoppable force. It took nearly 600 years to understand and conquer the plague, but its shadow still lingers in the annals of history. The story of the Black Death is a reminder of humanity's fragility and resilience, of how disease can alter the course of history, and of the remarkable advances that eventually save us from the brink. While the world still grapples with pandemics today, few will ever compare to the horror unleashed by the Black Death.